Hey all, it's JDC. I just want to say thank you for the really good reception that I've had on the tutorial video that I released. There's been some really nice comments on there that just honestly, it makes my day when I see them. I did just do this to try and help people, and yeah, it seems like it's done that. I just thought I'd make this video just to supplement that kind of intro training. This is about weapon customization, which it only becomes available at level 10. What can happen is that when you get to level 10, it doesn't show up on the armory where I'm going to show you it. If that happens, just quit out your game and load it back up. And if you're on Steam, what you can do is verify your game files. If it still doesn't work, maybe drop it in the comments and I'll see if I can find the solution online. But anyway, taking that you've done all that, we'll go and find the armory now. So after you come out your hell pod, and this is the main part of your ship, the armory is literally just on the left before you get to the galactic map. I think the first thing that's worth noting is that when you're in a mission, you gain XP for the weapon that you have equipped when you go into the mission. So if you were to pick up a friend's weapon, which by the way, for all the experienced Helldivers watching, I definitely recommend it just for fun, you drop your weapon and let what some of the newer Helldivers pick it up, just to give them a taste of other kinds of weapons. But yeah, so if you pick up a weapon, you're not going to gain experience with that. You're going to be getting the experience with the one that you dropped in with. The other thing to note as well is that you gain experience depending on the difficulty of the mission and also the length of the mission. So for example, a blitz, which you might be familiar with now if you've seen the tutorial, essentially these are much smaller sort of 15-minute missions, whereas obviously a full-length mission can take up to 40 minutes. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of undecided as to which is the quickest way to do it. I think I have heard people just do D10 blitzes over and over again, but I wouldn't recommend that because essentially, although getting to the end as quickly as possible can be fun, and if that is your playstyle, feel free to do that. I would recommend just taking it slow and enjoying your time. The first 500 hours of this game were amazing, and it's still amazing now, but I didn't rush things. It was just taking it as it comes. But again, if that's your playstyle, that's absolutely fine as well. The other thing to note is that you definitely want to extract at the end. If you don't extract, you won't get as many experience points. The way I level up guns is I like to see if there's anything useful that can be unlocked later down the line by leveling it up. Obviously, if it really fits into a build, I'll just level it up because I like that weapon. So for a classic example, there would be the Torture from the Freedom's Flame warbond. So this, you actually can't have any attachments for it, but you have all these different patterns. I was just using it because it was a good weapon, and it the fact that you could level it up and get different camos for it was just another positive. So don't forget that you can just level up weapons for fun. A kind of trial by fire that a lot of Helldivers will do is leveling up the Constitution. This is kind of it's one of those, it's got iron sights, you can't have any attachments for it, and it's bolt action, I think. So it's one of the most difficult weapons to sort of use because it's not meant to be, a great experience. I like to upgrade weapons that you can increase the range on, for example, or weapons that you can get a larger magazine size for. If a weapon has really high recoil, obviously you can get flash hider, compensators and things like this to reduce it. And finally, weapons with high spread such as shotguns if you want to try and make that grouping a bit tighter. It's also worth noting that while you can upgrade most primaries, there are some that you can't. So obviously with the new ODST warbond, you aren't able to upgrade those. All secondaries can't be upgraded and throwables can't, and also support weapons can't be upgraded either, just worth noting. Another thing is that you can have different weapon configurations, as you'll see on the right. I personally don't use any other configurations, although if you prefer different camos at different times, feel free to do so. You just click on it and it will show you the different configurations of that specific weapon. But yeah, so feel free to use that as one you like. So for example, if it's a night mission, you might want to use configuration 2 if it's got a flashlight. For the assault rifle, for example, your configuration 2 might have a smaller magazine for quicker reloads and a flashlight or a laser. So just these little things to think about, really. Another thing to see here is weapon traits. So in the bottom right, you'll see statistics about it, and you'll see weapon traits. So yeah, damage, self-explanatory, how much damage it does. The way I'll usually look at damage in the game is how does this relate to the mission that we'll be playing in. So for example, a Devastator on the bot front has got, I think its head is either 120 or 110 health. So what you can obviously divine from that is that he's going to take 2 shots of the Liberator to take it out, which doesn't sound like a lot, but obviously if you're trying to hit your targets, that is obviously one of those things where, you know, you need to be, you know, it's nice to one-shot. For example, with the Deadeye, you're able to one-shot a Devastator to the head. So that's just something to consider. Capacity is really important as well. Something that we'll go into a little bit later is some weapons can't have magazine upgrades. So for example, the Diligence versus Diligence Counter Sniper, you might say, oh, well, I'm obviously going to take the Diligence Counter Sniper because not only is it medium armor penetrating, it's got more damage. So that sounds like an obvious choice, but then you say, well, the Diligence Counter Sniper's only got 15 rounds, whereas the Diligence has got 25. And I think personally that armor penetration is in a really difficult spot right now because light armor penetrating weapons are usually higher damage. Obviously not in the case of the Diligences, but if I show you the Liberator, for example, the main Liberator does a damage of 80, the Liberator Penetrator does a damage of 60. So you might say, oh, well, clearly having a higher armor penetration is better because obviously I want to be able to damage all types of targets. However, on the bot front, for example, a lot of the bots will have weak points that are light armor. So instead, having higher damage is better, you know, for example, than armor penetration because you're only going to be, you know, if you're accurate, and obviously if you're not, fair enough, you know, I would maybe pick a weapon that's got higher magazine size. But yeah, so it's just one of those, like, that's the kind of trade-off you need to be thinking about. Some other stats or weapon traits that are worth noting is one-handed. So if you're carrying a piece of, you know, an objective, so whether it's like uploading sensitive data or it's, say, the egg from a mega nest on the bug front, or potentially, you know, like confidential information from the bots, you know, from a bot fortress. You know, it's very situational, but it's one of those it's worth noting. Other things that you might see are as rounds reload. So the Deadeye, the shotguns, like the Slugger, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, rounds reload. Punisher, rounds reload. The reason why that's a good weapon trait to have is because it means that instead of, when, like I mentioned in the tutorial, when you reload, if your magazine's got any ammo in it left, that is discarded. Rounds reload means that you never discard a magazine, you only ever reload the rounds that need to be reloaded. Tends to be that they have lower capacity than obviously their magazine counterparts, but yeah, it's just one of those. Incendiary is another one as well. What that means is that if you continuously shoot an enemy, it will put the target on fire and they will take damage. Fire is armor penetrating, I think, so that has obviously an edge over, you know, some weapons that are limited by their armor penetration. In a recent update, it meant that it takes longer for an enemy to go on fire, but once they are on fire, they take a lot more damage depending on their size. That's an interesting one. Heat is another one, for example. So if a weapon trait says heat, that means it's gonna fill up. So instead of having a magazine, you've got like a heat sink. So up until a certain heat sort of level, you'll be able to continuously fire the weapon. But then what you'll need to do is wait for it to cool down. So the good thing about this is sometimes you can go an entire mission without using a full magazine if you don't encounter many enemies and if you've got good trigger discipline. Honestly, with, like, you know, sort of heat sink weapons, I barely ever use one magazine because you can just wait for it to come down, for the heat to dissipate. And you can even get upgrades for the different energy weapons to mean that they don't fill up as fast. Yeah, or cool more quickly, so they're all cool things. Chargeup is interesting, so that means that you'll have to charge the weapon up by holding the left trigger before you fire. Now the Purifier isn't exactly that because you can spam fire it. It's just that if you charge it up, then you're able to make the bolts explode on impact. The Scythe is unique in that sense it's a beam, so the beam can travel an infinite distance and it doesn't experience any bullet drop, but it just means that you need to hold the beam in place on the target for it to do maximum damage. Another one is explosive, so a lot like these guys. Explosive obviously means that it's going to do explosions outwardly. So again, in a most recent patch, it used to be that shrapnel and explosions was sent in the direction opposite to where it hits, as you'd imagine, like with the cone, but now it sends it in all different directions. So weapons like the explosive crossbow and the eruptor and the scorcher, if we're talking on the bot front, for example, they're going to be able to pierce through, but be able to damage a devastator that has a shield through the shield, which is really important. Another interesting weapon trait that isn't actually mentioned on the weapon is whether or not they have stagger. So I don't have a full list, so obviously I'll maybe see if I can find something online. If not, then obviously I've not done it or not looked. But if you look at some weapons, it says they stagger enemies. That means that's good, because what it means is that if an enemy is in a firing animation towards you, like a reinforced scout strider, if they're about to fire their rockets, you're able to stagger them, which means they won't be able to be as accurate. The other thing I wanted to raise as well is that the weapon trait being medium armor penetrating in the bottom right, unfortunately doesn't give it the full story. In Helldivers 2, armor penetration is actually on a scale of 0 to 10. So, and I think, I don't have the figures to mind, but essentially armor, it's like medium armor penetrating can be anywhere between, say, let's say 3 and 6. So if an enemy can still have medium armor, but you won't be able to penetrate it with the reprimand, for example, if the armor is 6 and the reprimand is 5. So I am going to leave a link to that in the description, so you'll be able to go and do your own research, but that's just a little idiosyncrasy that I think is worth noting. One thing I would say about ergonomics on weapons, so if, for example, if we go into the basic liberator, you're able to increase ergonomics by using things like, so this is obviously going to make it go down, I have a no underbarrel. Then the angle grip will increase ergonomics. That means it will basically be quicker to turn. So like when you turn as a Helldiver, it will take less time for the gun to be centered back on your aim. One thing I would say though is that if you are running the Viper Commando armor, which is the armor that I love, that is actually not as essential. So some of the main culprits for having really poor ergonomics, for example, are the Eruptor and the Diligence. So these weapons have very low base ergonomics, although it doesn't tell you that in the stats here. Although I guess that says 57. Let's see what a basic Liberator has. 32. So that's the odd thing. I think the Liberator has higher ergonomics, so it's much quicker to center your aim. Unless, hang on a sec. Does ergonomics increase or decrease? Yeah, it increases, which is odd because I would have thought that the Eruptor would have lower ergonomics, unless this is just another stat that they haven't included. Or maybe sway, maybe, yeah, so sway is 2 on that one. How big is sway for the Liberator? It's 2 as well. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that when you turn with some weapons, it takes a long time to center. The Viper Commando armor, that if I show you here, I do have it in the video I did on warbonds, but the Viper Commando armor, you don't even have to buy the full warbond, like for the full 1,000. You can literally go on to page 5 of the superstore, and I think the Jaguar is about 250 super credits. Honestly, I run that armor all the time. If I show you, so it improves weapon handling with less drag on weapon movement. The recoilless rifle has almost 0 drag now, you know, and the diligences as well. So seriously consider getting that instead of thinking that, you know, putting a angle grip is going to be the holy grail of ergonomics. If you can fit the Jaguar into your build, focus on, if we see now, I personally would focus on like vertical grips, because what that means is that you're able to reduce the recoil. So yeah, that takes me on to another good point, that what you have on the bottom right here is a recoil simulation. So what that means is that if we were to take off the vertical grip, because at the moment on my Liberator I've got a flashlight vertical grip, let's take that off, take off the muzzle. I'll show you the short magazine just so you can see the evolution over time. But for example, the recoil sim now is a lot, the spread is not as tight, and also there's more vertical recoil. So now if we say, let's put the vertical grip with flashlight on, that obviously brings it down a lot, because obviously now the Helldiver's not suffering through more recoil. And then if we put a flash hider, it's going to be, there's still some vertical recoil, but it's a lot tighter. In fact, let's throw the muzzle brake on, so it, because we can manage vertical recoil by like either pulling down on your joystick if you're on controller, or pulling down on your mouse a little bit. The horizontal recoil is much harder to control. If you've played Siege like I do, then you're going to know what vertical, horizontal recoil is. Anyway, so then if we put, so basically these magazine sizes, the reason why I love drum magazines is because if you're in a firefight, the last thing you want to do is run out of ammo as you're shooting an enemy. It's much better to have a slightly longer reload time when you're not in combat than, you know, have a very short magazine and then basically run out of ammo mid firefight. That's my ethos on it, is that if you are in a firefight and you need to spam ammo towards someone, you're better off having a drum magazine that's got, you know, as you say, 60 bullets in, than a short magazine with, say, 30, or an extended one with 45. So yeah, that's what I would say. Going away from the more sort of logical aspects of the weapons and more into sort of patterns and things, these are all the patterns that are going to be available for most weapons. They unlock at certain weapon levels. So let's see, I do have this one. So Liberator Concussive, this is another Stagger weapon, by the way. For example, if we go into patterns, you get the default or the Helldiver, and obviously you get different camos that I'll let you go through in your own time. I won't read them all out. Obviously Venus and Knight are level 25, so obviously they're quite sought after. Some weapons I think do deserve their default skin, because like for example with the Liberator Concussive, it's orange, which is one of the only weapons that is orange, so it's like, that's pretty cool. And then if we go to the Breaker Incendiary, obviously that's orange too, and it also stands out against, you know, the Breaker. So if I, for example, put, never mind, I don't even have it, but essentially the point I'm trying to make is that there we go. So let me show you the first one. So you can obviously see the outline is a bit different for this, but if we get Venus, save, it's hard to see the difference, especially when you have a Breaker. So just imagine that there, that camo, but with like these two breakers, like they look almost identical. So yeah, I mean, not that it matters much, you'll know which one you're picking, but yeah, so that's just another thing to think of basically. But yeah, obviously most of the time it's just down to personal preference how you want it to look. Another thing to note, so you can use flashlights on night missions. I don't really tend to, because the problem that you can get is there's really high contrast, so you'll be looking at an enemy and it will get obscured within the white, or like it'll reflect off the surfaces of it. The one thing that I would say in bonus of flashlights is that next season, if you want to call it that, we're going to be going underground, and the devs have alluded to the fact that it might be a good idea to have at least one person in your squad with a flashlight. So that's just something to consider. In terms of actually upgrades that aren't currently in the game that I would like to see, I would love to see, for the Scythe, for example. So this is light armor pen, and it's obviously a decent amount of damage. It can kill a Devastator in, I think it's like a second or two, maybe half a second. But obviously you get given, if we look at the amount of magazines, you get given 3 magazines with it. Now, again, like I was saying with a lot of heat-based weapons, if you've got good trigger discipline, you're probably not even going to use like a single magazine, or maybe one at max. I would love to see an upgrade for the magazine where it's maybe like a blue laser that's a more like highly damaging laser, or it's a higher armor penetration, but you get like 1 magazine. So like it's a huge risk, because if you don't manage it well or you accidentally use it, then obviously, you know, you're not going to have a magazine. But if you do, it's like for the highly skilled players, they've got an option there. So I think that would be awesome. Another upgrade that I would love to have would be getting black napalm for the torture instead of the usual orange, because as we say, I mean, yeah, capacity, so we actually can't see the number of magazines that it gets. I think it might be 3, but I would love to do more damage and have fewer number of magazines, because like there's a game I used to play called Command & Conquer Generals, 0 Hour and Generals, but you could get an upgrade for the flame tanks that had black napalm, and it just looked awesome. So it's just one of those, like, You can try and balance it essentially by obviously giving us less magazines, but like more damage. I think that would be really cool. In terms of weapon priority list, so we'll go through mine now. The weapons that I've tended to upgrade are weapons that I get a lot of utility from, weapons that you can get increased magnification with. So for example, with the Deadeye, you can go all the way from a basic 4x scope to a 10x sniper scope, which is awesome. I've been really enjoying that. Weapons that have really high recoil, so obviously like we talked before about the Liberator. The Reprimand, for example, is a notorious one for this. If you look at the recoil without any of these, it's atrocious. Like you can see as the magazine's being emptied, that's what this little red and yellow figure is, or red and white. As the magazine's being emptied, it's really high. We put a vertical foregrip on that, we put a flash hider on that, it makes it a lot more manageable. So yeah, but I mean, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the Reprimand, so I don't use it that much. The other thing is weapons with high spread. So if we look at the Breaker Incendiary, for example, though the spread is quite high there, I haven't, because I prefer other weapons with bugs, like fire weapons tend to work really well with bugs, but look how much tighter the spread is if we go from the no attachment to the half choke to the full choke. Now, the only thing that is interesting about this actually, and I think with other shotguns as well, is you get the option for a duck bill. So it can almost completely negates the vertical recoil, but gives a lot of horizontal recoil. So if you've got a lot of enemies in front of you, you're able to like hit all of them at once. So personally, I don't run shotguns that much, but that's something you might want to try just to see if you like it. In my opinion, definitely upgrade the weapons that you can get extended magazines on. So that's Liberator, Liberator Penetrator. Liberator Carbine is a great weapon. So in terms of which guns you should upgrade first, I'm going to break this into 3 different tiers. So the first tier is going to be if you haven't got any warbonds yet and you haven't got the Super Citizen Edition. Then I'm going to talk about which warbond weapons are really good. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Knight, which is the one that's on here. If we're talking about weapons that are really good from the base game without any warbonds other than Helldivers Mobilize, the Diligence is a very good one. The reason for this is because on the bot front, it can one-shot a Devastator in the head. It's got 25 rounds capacity, which is nice, versus other traditional marksman rifles, which don't have as many. The Amendment's got 20, for example. The Deadeye's got 8, although that is really good. The Diligence Counter Sniper only has 15. Which I find is just a little bit too small on the bot front for me. So that's why I went with the Diligence instead of the Counter Sniper, because it has 10 more rounds in the magazine. We can get some nice upgrades here, like the vertical grip and muzzle brake. That just allows us to get rid of almost all horizontal recoil. As mentioned before, the Liberator Penetrator is really good, especially early on in the game when you're getting used to armor penetration and things. Medium armor pen for a primary is really good. This weapon can carry you through a lot of the bot on the bot front if you haven't got any warbonds. You have to work your way toward a drum magazine, I think, at level 23. You can get obviously like muzzle brakes, flash hiders, vertical grips, which are really good. One of the odd things I find is that you only have the option of a flashlight vertical grip or a laser sight angled grip. It would have been nice to maybe get the option of say, oh, well, what about if I want a laser sight and a vertical grip? It just is what it is. Until it changes, that'll be the case. And if you want a laser sight and a flashlight, you have to use that certain sort of combination, which means you have to forego a vertical grip, which is a shame, but is what it is. Increased magnification is good on all weapons. So again, it's like I said in the tutorial video, I would primarily use your first person perspective for long range shots and use third person for close range. Another thing that I may not have mentioned actually in the tutorial is that you have an FOV slider. So if I try and find my vertical field of view, you might think obviously that having a really tall field of view would be good, and it would make sense. The only problem with it is when you start to aim down sight, because obviously the FOV is really high, you're not going to be able to see barely anything down the scope. So that's why I ended up dropping it all the way down to the minimum, so that you've got a real... Oh, yeah, there we go. It zoomed in way too much and then come back out. But you've got a really nice sight picture whenever you're looking down the scope now. So that's really important to note. So another really good primary that is in the base game is, as we've mentioned, the Scythe. Very good on the bot front. I wouldn't recommend it on the bug front or Illuminate, only because Illuminate tend to favor high magazine weapons because of amount of shields you've got to put up with, flesh mobs, these kinds of things. And the bug front, I wouldn't recommend it because it's got no stagger, so it won't be able to prevent someone from coming at you. But yeah, bot front is really good for headshot and devastators. No bullet drop, infinite range basically, so good for sniping. The Scorcher was a gun I used a hell of a lot for bots initially. It's good for people who are a bit worried about their aim on the bot front, because when you start encountering shield devastators, the ammo from this penetrates through the shield and destroys in about, I think, half a magazine it can destroy a devastator, so it is quite ammo hungry, but it's also full auto. And yeah, if you wanted to combine that with, say, Urban Legends armor or the Cinder Block, that would give you an extra few magazines and a quicker reload speed, so that's a decent build to take for that one. The last one I want to talk about is the Breaker. So the Breaker shotgun doesn't automatically come with a drum mag, and obviously if you're using a shotgun, you want as many rounds as you can. Because of their nature, you're going to be up close and personal with shotguns, so if you run out of ammo and you're up close and personal to an enemy, it's not obviously a good thing to be. So the more ammo that you have in the initial stages, the better. Now we're going to go into the warbond section. So the Eruptor obviously is a really good weapon to use. You can upgrade it for better ergonomics, but again, if you're running the Eruptor, you're probably running the Eruptor, the Recoilless, and the Talon, for example, on bots. So because you're running the Recoilless, or maybe an equally heavy weapon like the Khazar, you're going to be wanting to run Viper Commando anyway, so it's not as essential. I think the only reason I left that on is so I could get the laser sight, and because, as you can see, the difference is minimal. You're not really worried about recoil with bolt action weapons anyway, because you can only fire one round at a time. But yeah, explosive crossbow is one of my favorite ones as well. Very good for the bug front, like if you have explosive crossbow, Verdict or Talon, Khazar and Hoverpack, because what this means is that you can hoverpack yourself to a very high point, and similar to the Eruptor actually on this, you can close bug holes by shooting into them with the explosive weapons. If you haven't got the Freedom's Flame warbond yet, then yeah, I would recommend working that into your bug build, because it's also good against bugs for Stagger. Breaker Incendiary comes with Steeled Veterans. That revolutionized the bug front for me. Initially, bugs were really hard and I didn't understand why bots were easier, but once you start to get high capacity weapons and incendiary as well, because a lot of the bug force is light armor, the Breaker Incendiary can really revolutionize things for you. As I mentioned before, you've got, half choke, full choke, and a red dot sight that you can get just to increase magnification a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely a good one to choose. Then obviously I've been singing its praises, but the Torture is a really good weapon. I really enjoy that. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the Knight. The reason why is because you get it with the Super Citizen Edition, and honestly, it's amazing. It's got very little recoil once you get all the upgrades for it. You can get an extended magazine, which gives it 70 rounds, which is 10 more than you get with, I think, all the other drum mags for assault rifles. 2x scope, one-handed, so you can carry objectives with it. The fire rate is insane, so that one's very good for the Illuminate front. If you haven't got the Knight, the Liberator Carbine is basically the midway between an assault rifle and the Knight. This one, obviously, really fast fire rate at 920, magazine of 60, and obviously if you look at that recoil, I mean, it's insane. There's basically no recoil there when you put the right things on. Very good for the bot front, because obviously with that fire rate, you don't even have to try and mitigate recoil and you've already destroyed a Devastator's head. So yeah, that's definitely one worth thinking about. But after all, I mean, weapons are all down to personal preference. It's not all about meta chasing, and just use the weapons that you enjoy. You know, if you want to try and get the Constitution to level 25 as sort of a rite of passage, go for it. If you enjoy Dark Souls, you'll probably enjoy doing that. I've never played Dark Souls, but I know the memes about it being super difficult, so that sounds like something that you might enjoy. It won't be me doing that for a long time, I don't think. So yeah, I think that about does it. I just want to say thank you again for watching. Obviously like and sub if you're enjoying it. And next video, hopefully next week, will be similar to the Terminator video that I did, but for the automatons. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.